Hi, I'm David Fetter, Executive Editor Technical for Prepared Foods Media, and welcome to a Prepared Foods presentation on ingredient trends in new product development for sugar reduction in RTE and heat and eat cereal products. Joining us today is Dr. Kantha Shelke, principal of Corvus Blue, LLC. They're a Chicago-based food science and research firm specializing in industry competitive intelligence, expert witness services, and new product and technology development. And in addition to being a certified food scientist and an in-demand industry contractor for the commercialization of foods and ingredients for health and wellness, Dr. Shelke also teaches food science at Johns Hopkins University. And of course, she's a regular expert contributor to Prepared Foods. Today, Dr. Shelke will chat with us on the important issues of lowering the amount of sugar in kids' cereals. Let's dive in. Welcome, Dr. Shelke.
Hello, David. Thank you for having me as a guest on your podcast. You know, I truly appreciate this opportunity to have a conversation about a very important topic in the food aisles today.
Thank you. It is a very important topic. And it's worth pointing out, sugar is not an enemy, but consumer concern over the amount of sugar is pretty high and still is. And I also want to stress when we're going to talk about sugar in this context, we're referring predominantly to sucrose and fructose. So just wanted to clear that up for our audience. But in talking about it with cereals, cereal, although not the top source of refined sugar for children, it's one of the top. I believe it's in the top 5. And this does have parents concerned. And I recall just a few years ago, I was visiting with a friend, and he had a box of a particularly well-known and highly popular RTE cereal that was made of flakes that are frosted with sugar. And I hadn't had any of that in a good 50 years. So I'm hit by a wave of nostalgia, and I tried some. Dr. Shelke, it was so over the top, sweet and sugary. I very literally had to spit it out. I couldn't even swallow it. So how is it that the sugar cereal I loved as a kid could send such a jolt to my system today? Do the pre-sweetened RTE cereals of today have more sugar than they did in the 60s?
Well, yes and no. I can understand your experience. But the fact is that many ready-to-eat cereals are actually better for you these days because they've got added vitamins and minerals, and they do have less sugar than many brands. But things have changed since you and I had cereals when we were young. Cereals, one thing that has changed is the sweetness that's used to manufacture cereals. So today, these cold cereals that you and I knew as a child were made with molasses and maltose from barley flour, so they're complex. But now they've switched to sucrose. So there are still some classic sugary cereals that have stayed with their original formula, but those with sucrose or even fructose tend to taste sweeter.
Gotcha. So it's not just an aging palate that I have.
Sure. Aging palate also does. We become wiser with age, and so we want things, it takes less to please us. But the other thing I noticed in the last 90 days or so, I've been traveling extensively, and I've taste tested these ready-to-eat cereals in several countries, on 4 continents, to be clear about where all I tested them. I can confirm that these ready-to-eat cereals tend to be pervasively sweet in the US, more so than their counterparts in Europe, in the Middle East, Africa, Northern Africa, and in Asia. And this is possibly because Americans tend to eat sweet breakfasts. I didn't see that in other parts of the world. You know how typical American breakfasts, they start with a muffin, pancakes with syrup on top of it, and sweetened beverages. Even the meat that we eat here, bacon, ham, sausage, all of them are sweet. So cereal makers have to compete with that sweetness. So they're aiming for sweetness as the prevailing taste of ready-to-eat cereals, rather than banking on the flavor of the grains, the nuts, and fruits, as they do in other parts of the world.
Yes. That does ring true. I remember in my travels, sometimes you'd get a predominantly savory breakfast, say in Asia, where you get a bowl of miso soup, or in Europe, even if you got a cereal, as you point out, it was mostly fruits and nuts and whole grains, as opposed to a highly modified product with lots of sugar in it. Why do these RTE cereals taste sweeter than what we remembered, despite having a lower sugar content?
Yeah. One of the reasons could be that the ready-to-eat cereals in the US today are formulated with refined grains and carbohydrates. We pride ourselves on having ingredients that have a clean taste, but the effect of that is they tend to enhance the perception of sweetness instead of blunting it, like the fiber, the protein, and the fat would in cereals that are made with whole grains or that have inclusions that consist of intact ingredients. Because our cereals, even the inclusions, tend to be fabricated clusters, and all of those are so clean tasting that the sugar tastes sweeter.
Then let's segue over to sugar reduction strategies. And again, when we say sugar reduction, we're referring to sucrose and fructose. There certainly are forms of sugar. This is why I stress that. There's still sugars, natural sugars, real sugars, tagatose, allulose, tagatose at 1.5 calories per gram, allulose at 0.2 to 0.4 calories per gram. And they can make excellent alternative sweeteners. So they're sugars, but they're a different kind of sugar. So, and then before we jump into that, I wanted to throw a loaded question at you. Are sugary cereals, we mentioned a little bit at the beginning, that they're in the top 5 sources of sugar intake for kids, but are sugary cereals really that big of a worry? Do we need sugar reduction strategies?
Let's talk about the sugar content of ready-to-eat cereals. Children typically eat maybe a serving. Very few of them even complete that serving. And that's a very small amount that they're consuming per day. They get more of their sugar from their beverages. So if you want them to have a breakfast that also has vitamins, minerals, and fiber, something that they will enjoy, then we don't have to focus so much on the sugar as such, the added sugar. A little bit is perfectly okay. Remember, moderation. We do need some sugar, not lots of it. Nothing wrong with that. And I'm one of those who does not demonize sugar at all. I think sugar has a very important role in terms of functionality, but also in the sensory perception and enjoyment of any food for that matter. But sugar reduction is not just about reducing sugar. It's about looking at the whole formulation and the eating experience and strategies that minimize the sensory changes associated when you reformulate a product. Right. So when you're looking at cereal products, if you go into non-nutritive sweeteners and high potency sweeteners, those sweeteners might not be the ideal solution because then they become cloyingly sweet. There are other ways to make that cereal be pleasantly sweet, but not overload the added sugar content and be of concern to you.
Right, gotcha. So, but we do also have to consider caloric intake as well. The empty calories versus, as you said, calories of foods that contain other compounds, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals. So,
and now comes the science part. There's a body of research that suggests uncoupling sweet taste from energy load could actually lead to metabolic dysregulation and the associated negative health effects. In other words, the problem might not be sugar, but the sweetness. So I believe that there's a real need to reduce both sugar content, but also the sweetness intensity. We have to stop learning, we have to stop eating cereals and foods that are so sweet and start getting back little by little to something that tells us the taste of the food. So this is really a call to the industry to make these ready-to-eat cereals with other ingredients, a range of flavors, colors, textures. So you're gradually re-educating the palate of consumers. You're getting away from the narrow confines of cloyingly sweet products and going into something that's pleasantly but diversely flavorful with just a hint or a touch of sweetness.
Right. You were talking earlier about just that narrow sweetness only, instead of sweetness that is enhanced by textures and other flavors, et cetera, et cetera. And that does make a huge difference. We know cereal makers are aware of the consumer demand for lower sugar, but the need to use those sweeteners that don't lead to a metabolic dysregulation. With that in mind, what sugar substitutes should developers consider if they're trying to meet those demands?
So non-nutritive sweeteners and high-potency sweeteners are not the only way to reduce sugar or substitute sugar. So you don't have to focus just on the ingredient. How about focusing on the processing technology and looking at smart strategies like particle size reduction? So you're restructuring the surface to volume ratio so that when you add the amount of sugar, you may add the same amount, but a little bit can go a long way. And the taste perception that you get is very similar to another one that might have, say, twice as much sugar. So you have the same amount of sweetness, a great experience, but a lower amount of sugar. And that's if you're using sucrose or fructose, because it's been shown that the amount of added sugar in a formulation can be slowly reduced over time without affecting how consumers perceive it, as long as none of the other sensory attributes are affected, because they're eating it for its flavor, for its taste, for its enjoyment. So you really have to keep that in mind.
But there are also, as you pointed out, there's also the impact that texture has, and color, and our visual perception can easily enhance flavors. And color is more important to flavor than I think many people realize. So tell us more about the stealth reduction aspect.
I like this idea of stealth reduction. It's also sometimes called low profile reduction. So you don't cut out all of the sugar, but you gradually reduce it little by little. So they don't even notice it because they're getting used to a new taste. And the Kellogg Company successfully used this strategy of stealth sugar reduction in 2010, and they gradually lowered the sugar levels in 9 out of 10 of its products by as much as 20%. That's about 1/5 of the added sugar. That's pretty big.
Yeah, and if I recall, they did very gradually, something over like 10 years they did this, but just drop by drop by drop, lowered it. So what other processing changes, as opposed to ingredient swapping, can cereal product developers use?
Well, there's a number of processing technologies that's that can enhance appeal to children. So caramelization, roasting, drying and dehydrating, and even fermenting, all of these can help enhance the sweetness and the flavor that's associated with sweetness, so that people get sort of like, the vanilla, brown, Maillard reaction flavors instantly make you think that you're eating something sweet. And you do this without the added sugar at all. So the texture and the flavor can influence the perception of sweetness, and you can do that by different processing technologies. So when you think about it, it's not just about the texture or the physical attribute of the sugar, but it's also about how you prepare the base ingredients. So if you toasted all the grains, you toasted all the inclusions, you added some that are juicy, there's a variation in texture, all of these get you to give a range of sensory experiences in the same product, and they forget that the sugar has less sugar and the cereal has less sugar.
Yeah, it's almost, I'm trying to remember what process is called. It happens with vision, it happens with aroma, it happens with sound, that if it's repetitious, your brain will screen it out. So I can see where if you've got that one note of just sweetness without any accompanying flavor, texture notes, that your brain is going to diminish the perception to where you would need more to excite those those sensory nodes. That's very astute. So now, so we're talking about the ways other ingredients, but there are ingredients that do help, of course. So what would you say would be the best ingredient strategies for cereal developers to consider when they're creating a new cereal or reformulating an old one?
When it comes to ingredients, it's like children. You can't say one of your children is better than the other, right? So there's a range.
Well, I can't, no.
Yes, but nature offers a variety of options. So you can transcend this refined sugar by matching their temporal dynamics, the specific sweetness onset time, the time to peak sweetness, and how the sweetness decays. So there are things that I would suggest, like jaggery, which is also known as panela. So jaggery is something that we've used since ancient times and all over the world. So it's an amber to brown syrup or a soft amorphous solid made by cooking the sap of sugarcane, date palm, palmyra palm, sago palm, and coconut palm. This offers all that sucrose offers with color and a range of minerals and vitamins, which also add some flavor. And they're just perfect for extruded as part of the dough base, as a coating for flaked, puffed, as an inclusion on dusting and muesli, granola, and even in hot cereals. Coconut sugar now has become a veritable beacon to parents. They want the best for their children. And if it says coconut sugar, they pick it up.
Oh, that was really taken off. It seems to be everywhere now. I have some. I've got it. I've been using it in my coffee the past few days.
It really enhances the flavor and makes you think of your coffee as something new, doesn't it? That's what it does for sugar cereals too.
Yeah, I'm a coffee snob, not in the sense that I've got to buy, the $80 a pound Jamaican or Civic, but Civet coffee I wouldn't buy anyway. But just that I like my coffee to be exactly the same every morning. And, but I tried coconut sugar and it was very subtle. It added, again, a rounder note that brought out the toasted beans of the coffee just a little bit better. So I've been quite enjoying it. But yeah, it's popular and I succumb to the popularity. So
David, that's what we want product developers to do. To think like you, to round up the flavor. So you think about honey and maple and sorghum. You can round up the flavor of the dough that you're going to extrude or flake, or you can use it dried as a coating. And people like them because they're popular for their natural goodness. Agave is another one. Now, this also adds the prebiotic inulin for gut health. And while all of these syrups that I mentioned have the same number of calories as sucrose or fructose, because they have that complexity in their flavor, and they also come with vitamins and minerals, they elevate the perception of sweetness and can actually allow for a lower use of added sugar.
Yeah, I do use a little less coconut sugar than I would sucrose, table sugar. So,
Nature also offers us fruits, and fruits are multifaceted. So they bring functionality, they have fiber, they have color, they have texture, they have a range of sweetness and sensory profiles, and children love them. They like to pick them out. They like them, they want them either at the very beginning as part of it or at the very end. So there are different kinds of cereal eaters, just like you have different kinds of ice cream eaters, people who dig out the stuff and people who eat the whole thing. But dried fruits alone and in combination have a natural sweetness. And the good thing is, for marketers, it's not counted as an added sugar.
That's right. Yeah.
But they add intrinsic fiber, vitamins, minerals, and even phytochemical compounds. And that's really what. their color is what appeals to children. And that visual appeal is so important, especially early in the morning. And dates are surging in popularity. So it's not just date-derived sweeteners, but it's also their syrups. And there's a new entry in this lineup, and that's a sweetener derived from carob. I know you know all about it.
Yeah. So the ancient desert fruit is having a renaissance that, like dates, we're starting to see carob sweeteners show up in beverages, I've noticed. So applying it to cereals, I can see would add more depth of flavor, and you still get that sweetness, but it's not cloying.
Right. And marketers would like it because it gives them the option to talk about upcycled, zero waste pulp. You get that from the de-seeded carob fruit, and that's perfect for cereal application because they have that balanced mix of fructose and glucose, but they also give you soluble fibers and polyphenols. And most of all, carob contains D-pinetol, which is a bioactive inositol that is 50% as sweet as sucrose, but it has also demonstrated a significant insulin modulating properties. And we want those kind of materials in our food.
There are a lot of options out there. Any other options that you want to bring up, or too many to talk about?
The good news is there's so much to talk about. So every one of your formulations can stand out from the others. So it's not the same old. And nature has so much more for us. And I believe we are on the verge of a significant paradigm shift in these cereal-based products. So I'm hoping that product developers and manufacturers will listen to this and will reach out and ask for what else can we do. And I'm hoping suppliers will get on this bandwagon also to say, here are other things you can do to enhance not only the sensory appeal, but also the nutritional profile of your product.
Excellent. I know, we've gone over. I apologize, but I want to thank you, Dr. Shelke, for guiding us in new directions for sugar reduction in that point of focus for consumers, cereals. I want to thank our audience for joining us. And you can look for Dr. Shelke's in-depth article on sugar reduction in cereals in our January 2024 issue. And also, as I said, she's been a regular contributor and good friend and good source of wonderful information. So if you go to preparedfoods.com, you'll find many of her articles on everything. And this was just part one. Dr. Shelke is going to be back to present us with some new ingredients coming to the Sugar Reduction Toolbox in February. And you can dive into our growing coverage at preparedfoods.com as well under the media menu, and you'll find more of the on-trend topics. Be nice if we can find the tropics, right? Some more on-trend topics of interest for food and beverage formulators. And all our material is brought to you from top experts in the industry. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Shelke. And I'm David Fetter, Executive Editor of Technical Prepared Foods Media. And until next time.